Thank you. That moves us to item number 8 on our agenda, which is the superintendent's report. So I will turn it over to Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school board, to our community. It's an honor to bring forth our district focus. We have worked diligently to ensure that our focus is aligned with our strategic plan. And where am I pointing here? Thank you. And our strategic plan is driven by 3 critical questions that we ask each and every day. The first one is why. Why are we here? Why do we do this work? The second one is how. How do we accomplish our why? And the third one is what. What have we created? What have we actually been able to accomplish? And we have set forth our why when we asked 998 employees of our district, why do you work in School District 5? And that response was, we love and we grow our students. We asked them, how do we accomplish that issue of loving and growing? And it was through our mission statements. Still not working. And that's our mission statement, that we're focused on the academic development and growth of our students. And we articulate that through our strategic plan. Our strategic plan is driven by 4 performance goals that we have on school climate, on teacher administrative quality, student achievement, and gifted and talented strategies. And so we will continue to stay focused on that. If you can just advance it for me. We can continue to stay focused on the growth and development of our students as measured by school climate, teacher administrative quality, student achievement, and gifted and talented strategies. So at this time, we're going to do our monthly financial for May, and I want to ask our CFO, Ms. Paul, to come forward for our monthly financials.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Ross. Thank you again for inviting me here tonight to present the monthly financial report through May 31st, 2023. I will start with the revenue report. Oh, here we go. So before you have our revenue summary for the month ending May 31st, 2023. As always, the top portion of your page will show the local sources. So with 1 month left in the fiscal year, our local sources are at 100% of our budget. You will notice though that we are still a little bit short on property taxes. The offset is from interest income that we have earned over the year, but we certainly expect June to produce the budget for the property tax revenue that will come in through vehicle taxes in the month of June. Additionally, the state sources do want to pay close attention to the state aid. As you will see here, we are expecting our state aid to be just slightly higher than what we budgeted. This is based on the impact of our 135-day count from the state. Additionally, our retiree insurance is right on target with our budget, as well as our bus driver salary. We have received all of our payments from Tier 1 and Tier 2, and we are right on track with Tier 3 as well through May 31st. Overall, we are expected to be approximately $2 million more in revenue over budget, and this is mostly due to state revenue and the interest income increase. Next, I will turn it over to the expenditure summary through May 31st. So again, here, this is through May 31st, 2023. As you will see, we are about 83% of our budget spent through May 2023, and this is in line with our spending from the prior year. We definitely still have several payrolls after the June 30th year end to accrue back for employees that work less than the 240 days. All of our services and supplies that must be received by June 30th to hit FY23 funds. And just a quick reminder of the equipment overage that you will see of the 701,000 in the middle of your page. This was 600,000 of this was for the Irmo High School land that was approved to be paid out of fund balance. So you will notice that that overage there. Also, if you will look at the detail, if you notice that there are some negatives in the salaries line, this is due to bonuses being paid out in November that again was approved by y'all from fund balance. And there also is some slight increases to our overall budget due to health insurance, but this has been trued up in the new budget year. Are there any questions on the monthly financial report? Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Paul.
There was questions about professional development and how that works in our school district. So at this time, I'm going to ask our Chief of Academics, Ms. Tina McCaskill, to come forth to give an update on professional development.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Start off with, we'll talk about from a small perspective then get to a larger perspective about professional development. So it first starts with grade levels, departments, where our admin within the school building really looks at a needs survey and decides what do our teachers need, what do they say they need, give them some choice with that professional development. A lot of times that's done either on Tuesday afternoons or it's done like on Wednesday late starts for our secondary. But those are done on small scales with small groups of teachers. Then it goes to your school-wide professional development, again, based on needs that we may see in learning walks that we may do within the schools to see what types of strategies are in place based on professional development. Is that being implemented? So looking at how what we're doing is working or not, and then what targeted needs there are. Both of those are mainly school-driven. There are a few district-mandated things, which usually are really coming from the state level. Things like testing accommodations or looking at IEPs or KRA for kindergarten teachers, making sure that they understand that type of testing. So there's not a lot that comes from the district mandate at that level. Most of our district-wide PD comes in place whenever we're doing our Lead D5, which is where our teachers get to choose the 3 days that we have set aside. That's where they get to choose what they're going to go into and what types of professional development they're going to receive. There's Leadership Tuesdays where we have groups of teacher leaders that come in and meet with our coordinators so that they're able to talk about specific content and take that back to the schools to share, to make sure that we're staying in line with our standards and looking at what do those standards say, what do they really mean. A lot of times if you look at standards, there are a lot of words, but then when you start looking at what they truly mean and how they come across in your teaching, that's where a lot of the professional development has to take place. We have the induction program for our new teachers, the STARS program with our retention coaches. And then we also have voluntary enrollment with our graduate courses, which our teachers really like to be able to get their plus 18 and sometimes they're plus 30 with those graduate courses. So that's really a plus for them. Then we have targeted professional development. So our schools that have been named as ATSI or CSI or priority schools. So we have specific targeted professional development that's geared towards those schools. We have Title II funds that will help with that, as well as the money that comes from the state and the federal government that helps with those pieces and parts. I listed 2 things there for the upcoming year, the Universal Design of Learning, which really is targeting the needs of all students and making sure that our standards and our grade level content really is accessible by all students. We can make sure that there are certain accommodations, like we can have text to self whenever, we can have that as an accommodation for anyone. We can have where a certain text could be read to students. That could be accessible to anyone. So those are the types of accommodations that can be made in advance. There's a difference. You'll hear the word differentiation and you'll hear the word UDL. So differentiation is sort of a reactive, whenever you already know what the kids don't know. The UDL is the proactive, whenever you think about, well, we know this content, we know what's going to be difficult for kids, so what can we do to make sure that that content is accessible to kids in advance before they ever get it? So, and then we have conferences for local and national conferences, and this is where it gets a little broad because you have schools that have their own general fund budgets for professional development that they can fund conferences for their teachers if it matches their strategic plan. So whenever they look at their strategic plan and they look at their goals and they look at their strategies, they're looking for specific things that are going to target what their goals are. Same thing from a district perspective. We have Title II funds that we use our content coordinators to help guide that to some degree because they know the needs of their content. And then they will have conferences that they include our coaches on, or our department leads on, or our Lead D5 activators on. But all of our teacher leaders have access to be able to request those conferences. But it's always tied back to what are the strategic goals, what are the action steps, how is it going to be shared when you come back. If it's going to be for a personal teacher's gain, that may be a personal conference that they may choose to go to. But if it's for the larger good of the school or for the district, then those are things that we try to find ways that we can fund so that we're able to benefit from that at large. So that's a big picture of professional development, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do I have any questions? I actually have a couple of questions, if that's okay. So I know you just touched on it a little bit, that each school has their own budget allowed for professional development. And is this universal, the way that they select professional development experiences through every school, or does every school kind of determine what professional development their teachers are going to bring in on an individual school basis, so it's not consistent? That might,
We do have a professional development plan that our schools submit to us, and our directors do go through that. I'll go through those and make sure that it's consistent with their strategic plan. So there is some accountability to it, but as far as deciding what's needed within their schools, that is a team-based, school-based type decision.
Okay, and then you mentioned district-wide PD for the Lead 5 teacher choice. Are the teachers choosing from a predetermined list, or are they choosing based off of subject matter or content matter?
So it starts off, they choose by their content matter first, and then once those groups are established, then those groups get to talk about for the year, or maybe for just the next 3 months, we want to talk about this particular topic. And then once that topic's sort of decided or resolved, then they may choose a different topic that they want to go into. But they do have choice in kind of the avenues that they go in. But the content is somewhat is the start-off point.
Right. So what would you suggest, I've heard in from different teachers in different schools that want specialized or specific professional development opportunities for, like, say, a team or a department that they have found, and obviously you're constrained by budget, and I totally understand that. But when that happens, is there like a process where the district office is notified of specific schools that have a request that they can't fulfill every year or in any given year, where that could be on a watch list, or does that make sense?
It does.
Because I think that there's a lot of, I've spoken to teachers in different schools that really want to, bring an opportunity into their school, but we already have other, we've already committed to other programs, or it doesn't fit into a school-wide or a district-wide learning opportunity. So I don't really know how to answer those concerns on how we determine, does that make sense? I'm trying to say it without specifying.
No, I understand.
The school said this, or, does that make sense?
It does, because we actually, there's been a couple of schools this year that has come about. It fit in the realm of where their school leadership team felt that their school was headed. The school could not fully fund what they wanted to do, but with Title II funds, we were able to assist in a small way, because the Title II funds are budgeted in advance. So we have been able to help in that, but really they need to go to their principal, talk to their principal, make sure that it is in line with what their principal sees as a need for the school. If their principal can't fund it, they can come and ask their director. So they could ask Ms. Walters for secondary, or they could ask Mr. Giuliano for elementary. And then the three of us would talk about it and see what we could do. There is some discussion right now with Title II that may be even more of a possibility in the future, actually.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, thank you. Just to share a little bit with you, when I was principal, and I'm sure that a lot of the policies are still in place, the principals did have some flexibility because every school, and I've worked in all three clusters in this district, every school and every section, so to speak, has different needs. And so in order to help those teachers or those principals or the staff, general staff, to meet the needs of their specific students, they certainly would allow them to have professional development. If there was a new initiative that came down that was real important, then that would be mandated to make sure that teachers knew about that new initiative and that everybody was on the right track. I remember when data teams came about. Lord, we met weekly on data teams. We had a lot of professional development. The schools in the district thought it was very important for all schools to be on board. So if there was an important initiative, we were responsible, principals were responsible for making sure that teachers understood that so that they would be on the right page. But they did give us some flexibility for each school. And so in the old day, you did have a professional development budget that you could, talk with your teachers, have teachers meetings, your faculty advisory council or whatever would bring up issues, and so that principals did have that flexibility.
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments on this? Thank you, Ms. McCaskill.
Thank you.
Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Ms. McCaskill. I'm going to ask Rachel if you can advance the slide, and we're going to talk about the administrator's position on academic freedom. There's been so much discussion and emails and media about the academic freedom policy and its implementation in School District 5. I want to be very clear, I do not make comments about staff or students in any detail in public forum, but I do think it's important to talk about the policy in terms of the administration's position in public forum. And one of the things I think is important to understand is that there's been a lot of discussion, do we teach systematic racism or systemic racism? Do you believe in it? What is that position? And I think I need to be clear. Rachel, if you can go to the next slide on what we do teach. We teach our standards, our skills, and characteristics. I have not seen a standard on racism in the state of South Carolina. And so when the discussion of do we teach systematic racism comes up, I am confused because there is no standard on that. Now, what do we have standards on? We have standards on critical thinking. We have standards on debate. We have standards on making argumentative essays. We have standards on rhetoric. We have standards on helping the students think for themselves. And so in using that, you can do that by using different topics. You can use race, you can use class, you can use religion, you can use nationality, you can use ethnicity. You can use a lot of different topics. What's important to understand as we look at the purpose of the academic freedom policy is on the next slide. Is that first bullet, if you can see, is that at the end of the day, when it comes to any of these topics that our community hasn't worked out, that it's the student's point of view that is elevated. That the student must be able to reach independent conclusions after hearing all sides of a controversial issue. We teach the student to develop that. We promise our community and our students that they have that academic freedom. We promise our students that teachers will not attempt to directly or indirectly limit or control the judgment of any student. And that it's the students' ideas that come through. We say to our community that they have the right in this policy. This policy is not new. It goes back to 2011. And says that in this policy, they have the right, as a parent, if they have an issue, there is remedy for them. We would ask that they go to that teacher first. 9 times out of 10, you go to the teacher, the issue is resolved. However, the administrator is there. If you go to the next slide, you can see how the administrative rule procedures work. We want our teachers. This is public, think about it, our students are watching. So this will be in the classrooms. They're gonna ask, why were they there? What were they talking about? And we're gonna present sides that we've heard at the last board meeting, sides that we'll hear here, but we're gonna ask that student to decide for themselves what is truth to them. Whether it was Alexander the Great learning from Aristotle, or Aristotle learning from Plato, or Plato learning from Socrates, they all taught the same thing. Think for yourself. How many times we see even adults get news from one source and claim it as truth? And now we have our students, they're learning from us. I would love for our students to hear all sides, taking different points of view and determine their truth. That's the academic freedom that we have to have in our country, because now students are not listening to just one outlet. They're listening to just one person of one outlet. So how does that happen? What happens if a parent finds redress, if there's something that they think shouldn't be talked about? We're going to stand behind the notion to talk about it, but we're going to refer them to the standard. The standard is that student coming up with their own thesis, developing an argument behind it, supporting it with evidence, and coming up with an independent conclusion all their own. That's the academic freedom entitled to every student here. So if there's an issue, it's handled at the school. It's handled at the school between the teacher and the principal. If the principal is not available, it can come to a district administrator. It doesn't come to the board until the third offense. That's to allow the school and that teacher to use those materials. When you pick up the paper in our current events class, they're going to talk about it. But the true scholar, you will never know their position. I remember one of my students who's been reading the paper, she said, Dr. Ross, we used to take bets, I'm not going to call the teacher's name, on what political party this teacher was. Because we could never tell by the way she ran her classroom. We didn't know if she was Democrat or Republican, or we didn't know if she was liberal, conservative. She would question us in the way that Socrates would question his students. If you said the sky was blue, so how do you know? What evidence do you have to support that? We took bets, $50, who could prove who she voted for, because she would continue to challenge us to think for ourselves. That's the academic freedom that we promote in this district. That's the citizenry that I want to see for the future. I wish my children believed everything I believed and agreed with me on every position I took, but they don't. But I'll be rest assured, if they can say, independent in evaluating all positions, I was able to come up with this position myself. So I want to make sure that, as people think about, is this a board issue or not? It's not a board issue. It's a discussion between a department chair and a teacher and a principal, and a teacher and the parents, under the guise of the academic freedom policy. So in my opinion, the feelings and the thoughts of the adults are very important to me as superintendent, but what matters most to me is that my students have the ability to hear 6 and 7 different opinions on one topic and come up with their own thesis, support it with evidence, and come up with an independent conclusion. I'll say this as a personal story. My daughter came home one day and she said, Dad, we learned about the Civil War. I said, well, tell me, what did you learn? She said, it was about the workers. I said, the who? She said, like us, the workers. said, baby girl, I don't know if you read that right, but there were no employees on that plantation. She said, well, that's what was said in class today. I asked the teacher, can I get a copy of the book that we used to call enslaved people workers? And sure enough, in the book, it said the Eli Whitney's cotton gin made life easier for the workers, something to that effect. And it was right there in print. And she had to write about how the cotton gin improved life for the workers. And I wrote to the principal and to the district and to the state and to the publisher. And I asked, can a second opinion be introduced into that class? A narrative from an enslaved person. A first-hand account of how it actually was on the plantation. And I'm proud to say that I didn't talk about removing any idea, but introducing another opinion. So sometimes there's going to be topics that you agree with, and there's going to be topics that you disagree with. Academic freedom says even if you disagree with it, there'll be another opinion presented to our children. Our democracy needs that. We can't handle differences. And I need academic freedom so that the next generation can. With that, I'll take any questions on academic freedom policy.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. And just as a note, we do have under our discussion agenda a more thorough conversation about this policy, IB academic freedom, under 19 and 20 about controversial material. So with that, does anyone on the board have any questions or comments at this time? Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ross, for sharing your feelings and your thoughts on that. You know, again, I was in education for 33 years. I was a teacher, a coach, and a principal, and I really wrestled with all of this. I went through the board policy. I'm one of those that really studies this stuff because a lot of the stuff you sort of learn because of something that happens, an occurrence takes place, like what's happening tonight and what happened last board meeting. This policy also says boards must protect teachers from any censorship or restraint. What Dr. Ross was talking about is absolutely true. We do need to have open and honest discussions, but they do need to be open and honest. Think about that. Open and honest discussions. I'll save the rest of my comments for later.
Thank you, Mr. Satterfield.
Thank you.
I just feel compelled to say, because of what you just said, and I'm gonna limit it at this. The board conversations with teachers in the sense that you're saying, I mean, that I'm taking it, and I may be taking it wrong, they need to be open and honest with the teacher, but not necessarily with the public. Individual situations are not the matter of the public. So, and I'm gonna keep it at that.
Let me just add one thing to it. The point of this, and I knew Dr. Ross did his best to explain it, and there is a process. There's always been a process in place for parents. Yep. I was a principal. I promise you, I cannot remember an issue, and Dr. Ross can correct me because he worked with me. I never had an issue at my school that we could not resolve at the school level. But when board members get involved, as Dr. Ross said, it should never get to the board. If it goes through the proper channels, we should be demonstrating that we support these teachers.
Mr. Satterfield.
We don't demonstrate that by making public comments
Mr. Satterfield, I am not trying to cut you off because I'm not, this is not about that at all. We just have a full conversation on that coming up, so I don't want to, go off track on the agenda because we're still in the middle of the superintendent's report. Okay, no problem. Does anyone else have any questions right this second? Mr. Scully?
Yeah, real quickly, and this is in reference to a point that you made, Dr. Ross. When you said that it would be great for your daughter or your child to agree with everything you said or felt, I take a different position. I don't want my child to agree with me on everything because I am frequently wrong. And I rely on the teachers to present and provide additional viewpoints outside of my own. And so I appreciate that and I want to protect that.
Thank you, Mr. Scully. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Dr. Ross. We will come back. What is the term? We will circle back to that in just a little while. And so we will continue with your superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and I concur. I think, I want to make a clarification. It's, probably trying to be facetious and when I shouldn't be, but the goal is, at the end of the day, that students, we're developing that, whether they're their own sense of self. And it's going to go into what I'm talking about now, why this is so important. I use this picture because it reminds me of a story about the Maasai. There's 54 countries on the continent of Africa, over 3,000 tribes. The Maasai are not one of the largest tribes, but they're very famous because their warriors are lion hunters. And they hunt lions with spears and sticks, and they're very brave to do that. And when two Maasai warriors see each other, they have a greeting. If you hit the next slide, the button here, it's Kinsirian Ngera. Kinsirian Ngera. And that phrase translated means, and how are the children? Next slide. My disposition, the reason I'm in education, is just that question there. How are the children? And so when I talk about the positions we put our children in, or the academic freedoms, yes, I value every teacher we have here, all 1,416 of them. But they join me in asking that question, how are the children? And so I think it's important as we look forward to this year to be able to answer that collectively. Not all of our children are well. What's interesting about these Maasai warriors, there's only one acceptable answer to this question, how are the children? And that is Sapati Ngera, which means all the children are well. Because if all the children are well, what the Maasai know is that the nation is in trouble. The future is in trouble. And so my continual ask is that we join together until we can all say that all the children are well. And so how will we do that? If you go to the next slide, we do it by adding something, a new tool to the tool belt, labeling our emotions. Used to be that we would say that when kids came into the building, everybody was ready to learn. And now we have to ask that question, how are you feeling? And what we realize is that not all of our students can label all their feelings. They don't know all their emotions. Not all of our adults can do it either. And so what's interesting is if you look at these emotions, learning doesn't take place in all of these emotions. You go to the next slide, Rachel, you'll see James Russell, a psychologist in 1980, created what's called the circumplex model of affect. And what he said is that these four domains, active and passive, positive and negative, we can organize our emotions. That the prefrontal cortex, where that learning takes place, that deeper learning takes place, does not happen in the negative. So when kids are angry or afraid or sad or depressed, we're not able to teach. They're not able to learn. Now, if they're excited or happy, then learning can take place, but it takes a lot of energy to keep our kids excited and happy every single day. Where's the best learning take place? It's in the passive positive, where children are calm, content, at peace. Our goal this year, Madam Chair, members of the board, is to create an environment where 17,500 students have the ability to put themselves in that positive, passive voice, that mindset, that emotional state. Well, they have the tools to move from sad to content, to move to peace, to move from angry to calm, to move from depressed to at peace. To give them those tools. Our children are dealing with a lot. I know our teachers are dealing with a lot as they address those needs of the students, and we need to give them those skills. What gives us that authority? If you go to the next slide, Rachel. I go back to the profile of the South Carolina graduate. Because in the profile, it outlines life and career characteristics. It outlines our goal to give the students integrity and self-direction, perspective, perseverance, work ethic, and these interpersonal skills. So, Madam Chair, members of the board and our community, on the next slide, you'll see our objective for this coming year. And that's teaching bell to bell with SEL, social emotional learning. Working with our students to give them the tools, addressing the whole child curriculum continuum, so that we can get our students ready. That they feel safe, that they're healthy, that they have their mental health issues addressed, those emotions. That we can work in the community to address social issues like hunger and housing. That we can work with those negative behaviors that interfere with learning. That we can accelerate students who need acceleration and provide supports for those students who need supports. And when all of that continuum is done, that umbrella of protection, we will see the academic gains that our community expects. We will ask ourselves that question this year, and how are the children? And with our staff, our teachers, our administrators, and our community, our parents, we will work constantly so that we can respond, all the children are well. The next slide shows the story that we're going to tell, our wonderful children, the reason that we're here, and working together to provide that opportunity. Because that is our vision, that we love and grow our students. And I'm excited about the upcoming year as we continue to see them grow. Madam Chair, that concludes the superintendent's report, and I stand for any questions.
Do I have any questions from the board? I just have a comment, and just looking at the emotional state of mind and our goal being that we want the passive positive or positive passive, that children are content and calm. As a mom of two elementary school children and a 4-month-old, with my elementary school students' daughters, I noticed that is the hardest to achieve. And they have, I would think a pretty ideal situation, but being content and calm all the time, or even a majority of the time, is pretty tough. So when you look at that as the goal, and you compare that to the profile of the South Carolina graduate, and one of the skills, the world-class skills that you're looking for is communication, information, media, and technology, it's almost like it's an oxymoron, because it's really hard to have a young person's mind content and calm with all of the outside noise that we didn't necessarily have when we were all growing up. And so that's a challenge. And I know that's, especially post-COVID world, technology has definitely dug in, and you can't, what is it that you say, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube? I do understand that, but, I make the comment because as we work forward to making sure that all of our students are taken care of, especially in an emotional state. It would be nice to see more hands-on, more personalized interaction, and instead of like the technology and just putting so much media in front of kids. And that's just I'm just voicing my opinion. I know that it's not necessarily always as easy as it is to say, but I feel like that's a very hard, that is this being passive positive, that is definitely the ultimate goal to strive for, and we should absolutely do that. I'm just acknowledging how tough that is.
That's right.
In practice, for parents, for teachers, for everyone. And sorry.
And a lot of our
I don't like
schools
sound
are
effect.
engaged in this work. We want a systematic view of it, common vocabulary that expands all of our schools. But you could go to some of our schools now who are putting these practices in place. The biggest thing is just recognizing what emotion you're in and giving those students those vocabulary. What are you feeling? By just engaging in that. And we've seen it from elementary, we've seen it in secondary. To see it go in a classroom and a teacher who does a circle and ask those kids to kind of address those issues that they have, it allows for learning to take place. So we want to launch that system-wide and give our students those tools to handle those tough feelings so they can move towards that. You will end up in a lot of these different areas, but having the skills yourself to move yourself into a place of peace, I think we're giving the children a lifelong skill that we're all going to learn from.
I agree. Mr. Satterfield?
Yeah, I want to say one other thing, and I want to brag on Dr. Ross here. He is very forward-thinking in considering the different needs of our children. You can either share Dr. Ross or I can butcher it, but he has started a new initiative to help students in one of our feeder schools. You want to talk just a second, because it's quite impressive. I worked at Chapin High School where raising $35,000 in 2 weeks was not difficult. But I also worked at Seven Oaks where I'd pack 100 food bags a day for kids. Dr. Ross is starting an initiative to help students. Can you just give a 30-second synopsis? Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for that, and I appreciate that we are realizing if you look at the state of South Carolina, we average 7.5 hours of school a day. And you just think about over the course of a year, how long we have our students. We have them from the time they're awake to the time they go to bed, we have them about 20% of their year. The other 80%, they're in the community. Now, some of our students are getting a lot of enrichment during that 80%, but not all of our students. And so we're asking our teachers to do so much to address the mental health issues and teach and help with the social issues. It's a lot on our teachers. And so we started an initiative in an area, working at Irmo, I see the mayor's here, and we've been able to put our staff after school and during the summer in the community to help with, we call it wraparound services for those families. A child will learn better when they know at home is secure. And we're seeing some great returns on that already. I want to thank Julius Scott for his work there and Dr. Harris for making that happen. And so we look forward to coming to the board to give a full report on what we call our community support services. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, Dr. Ross, thank you very much.